So, this evening's finally coached session is all about muscle and why it is our longevity insurance. So, we know that we lose muscle as we age. So, we're going to be covering why that matters even more in our 40s and how a little strength training protects your body for decades. And some of this you will have heard me talk about before, I'm sure. So it's probably going to cover some of the things that you might already know. But I do think it's a good reminder because I think, particularly for people perhaps that are newer joining the program, one of the first things that we try and nail is nutrition. And we talk a lot about nutrition and outcomes that nutrition brings in terms of losing fat and so on. And strength is one of those things that I think potentially gets more focus the further into the program that you move. And just is something that as a group we don't talk a lot about. So, as I say, I think it's a good chance to bring this back to the fore as it is such an important topic. So, the thing nobody warned you about is that from your mid-30s, you do slowly lose muscle every year, and that happens really quietly, and you don't really notice that it's happening day to day. So you don't get a warning, but you might start to notice over time that you just feel a bit weaker, a bit softer, a bit more tired, and you can sort of blame yourself or your age, etc. But it doesn't mean it's about laziness or not having enough willpower. It simply is a biological process and it does affect all of us. But the good news is that this is not one way, and strength training can reverse it at any age. So it's called sarcopenia, and that is the gradual age-related loss of muscle mass and strength. From age 30, we lose roughly 3 to 8% of our muscle each decade, and we know that it speeds up as we get older, and particularly around peri and post menopause. And less muscle means less strength, but it also means a slower metabolism, and that's so important, particularly for fat loss. It also brings a higher risk of falls and frailty in later life, but muscle does respond to being challenged, whatever your age. So, as I just mentioned, the perimenopause accelerator. So, estrogen helps protect our muscle and bone, and as it falls through our 40s, so that protection also declines. Muscle loss speeds up, bone density can drop sharply in the years around menopause, and that's why things that felt automatic in our 30s, we now have to train for purposefully. And while that sounds daunting, it is actually, I think, really empowering because lifting weights is the single best lever that we have to reverse this effect. And muscle is so much more than it looks. So it isn't just about how we look in our clothes. It's one of the most important organs for health. So it's where our body stores and burns blood sugar, supports steady energy and insulin sensitivity. And as I mentioned earlier, muscle means a higher metabolism. And particularly that's so important for fat loss because it means that as we build muscle, so our metabolism increases, so we're able to burn even more at rest. And the more times that we go through this cycle, and the more muscle that we build means that over time we can increase our metabolism. I did a post quite a few weeks ago now where I talked about when I first started strength training, my calorie deficit was 1600 calories, but it's now 1800. So I can lose fat at 1800 calories. And that's simply because I've got a much higher metabolism now through building muscle than I did when I first started sort of 3.5 years ago. So it's also a reserve of strength and protein that your body can draw on through illness, injury, and older age. Our bones need it too. So bone is living tissue. It gets stronger when we load it and exactly the same way as muscle does. So lifting and resistance work signal to our bones that they should hold on to their density. And this, of course, matters hugely for us women because as falling estrogen raises the risk of osteoporosis and fractures. So strong muscles plus strong bones equals a body that stays capable and resilient for decades. And strength, of course, is independent. So the goal here isn't necessarily a number on a barbell. The goal is in the long term being able to carry our own shopping as we age. Leg strength and grip strength are amongst the best predictors of how well we'll age. And we obviously want to make sure that as we do age, we're able to continue doing things that we take for granted today. So getting up off the floor, going up the stairs with ease, getting out of a chair unaided, and all these things we're training for now so that we can keep them later. And every session that we perform is a deposit into our future independence. We also have the bonus, of course, of body composition. So strength training will reshape our bodies in a way that dieting alone can't. So you can drop a dress size at the very same weight because muscle is denser than fat. And I think it's important to mention here, this is one of the things I think that when we hear so much now about the fat loss jab, one of the things that is an issue with that is, of course, that while it is very successful at losing weight, typically what's happening is that people at the moment are losing a mixture of fat and muscle. And obviously, as you can see throughout the course of this presentation, muscle is so, so important, and we want to do everything we can to protect that. So using a fat loss jab, for example, without doing any meaningful strength work alongside it, I believe is a real worry. And as we think about kind of the NHS and so on, I think the risk actually is really, really high. And I think over the next few years, we will start to see more of those stories being talked about. Also, we know, again, this is a subject that we talk about a lot, but weighing alone can be a poor measure. And this is sort of referring back to the fact that muscle is denser than fat. So how we look and feel changes more than the number on the scale. So we should be chasing strength, and body composition changes will follow. The benefits, of course, aren't only physical. Strength work is really powerful for mood and confidence. It's also linked to lower anxiety, better sleep, and it's a genuine proven mood lifter. And we always say you never regret a workout. I think there is a particular confidence that does come from realizing that you're strong and capable, and working on that, I think, gives us a real sense of achievement. It also changes how we carry ourselves and not just how we look. And I mean that quite literally, because I personally find, and I know that I've seen it in clients as well, that the more that we train for strength, we improve our posture, etc., and so on as well. So, in terms of cardio, of course, this is brilliant for our heart and for stamina, but alone, that is not going to build or protect muscle and bone in the same way that resistance training does. So, resistance training is a must. Cardio is for our heart and strength. While it does actually help to build our heart, the strength is for muscle, bones, and metabolism. So, you don't necessarily have to choose, but strength is something that should definitely be there. You won't get bulky. So this is something that does come up quite a bit. And I really love the analogy that just because if, for example, if you were to go out tomorrow and buy a Formula One car, wouldn't make you a Formula One driver. So women only have a fraction of the testosterone that is needed to build large muscle easily. So strength training gives us lean and toned muscle, makes us capable, but it doesn't make us bulky. And if you have seen examples of people out there that you do think look too muscular, then I can guarantee that the reason for that will be because they've trained hard for years and on purpose. If you're starting your journey now, that is far less likely to happen. So yeah, you're not going to get there by accident. But of course, it is never too late to challenge our muscles, and they will respond to training no matter what the age. And this, I think, is one of the most hopeful facts in health. So studies do show that people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s can still build real usable strength. And of course, all of us here are starting earlier than that, so have even more to gain. The best time to start was 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. So, in terms of what to do and what actually counts, strength training simply means working muscles against resistance. So, of course, this can be dumbbells, resistance bands, machines. It can, in some cases, be body weight. You don't always need a gym. Obviously, we've got with the assistance of dumbbells, etc., we can easily do workouts at home that can feel challenging, and that is the key. And the last couple of reps should genuinely feel hard. And in terms of progressive overload, so just really to follow on from that, ticking the box isn't enough. Muscles do need to be constantly challenged. So if you feel, for example, that when you're performing your workouts, and I'm sure this isn't the case for any of you, but if you do feel that you are perhaps doing them on autopilot, then that will just be ticking the box. We really need to feel that we are being challenged. So things to check in the next strength session that you do. Number one is range of motion. And this is before we come on to our sort of standard progressive overload factors. Range of motion simply means, are you getting the full range of your movement? So are you getting as low as you can in your squat, for example? When you're doing your shoulder press, are you bringing your arms down low enough and then getting the full range in the movement? So, good things to sort of stop and think as you perform each exercise. Am I really getting the full range? And for women watching this in the program, of course, you can always record yourself performing any of these moves and send them to me to check. Then, the next thing that we can look at is tempo. So, the more time that we have under tension, the harder and more challenging the reps will be. So, I would always say don't rush your reps, take it nice and slow. And particularly thinking about ladies that are potentially working out at home and don't have access to a huge number of weights, then making sure we've got a nice slow tempo is a great way to encourage that progressive overload factor. Reps. When you get to the end of your set, you should really feel that you've only got 1 or 2 reps in reserve that you could perform at with good form. And then the last one I would say would be weight, and we would move up the weights once we have ticked off the previous 3 things. So we can move on to a higher weight when we're hitting the top of our rep range across all of our sets and are confident that we have got the correct range of motion and tempo. So a job for you this week is simply just to score yourself and your effort in terms of your strength sessions on a scale of 1 to 10, and then ask yourself, are you getting in all of your sessions? Do you feel like you're pushing yourself? And when's the last time you increased either your weight or your reps? And of course, if you have any questions on your workouts, or if you're not sure whether or not you should be moving up weights or reps, then do just reach out to me. That brings us to the end of the formal training. So I'm just going to stop recording. That's the wrong button.